freak out because sometimes it makes it reboot.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Standards Collaboration Space with our lovely friends and creatures. It is November 14th, 2023. We have a couple of folks coming in late, including our chair, Jory. So I thought I would just kick off and get things started. Do we have any announcements to make? Nothing super urgent. How about sort of report outs on your security things you've been working on, groups, activities? I'm going to go around the room. Jordan, you have something?
Yeah, I mean, TC39 will be at the end of this month, the 99th meeting. It'll be remote, and I believe it's in the San Francisco time zone. So feel free to check out the agenda if you're interested in what's going to be on that meeting. And I'll come back to this meeting afterwards and summarize it.
Are you going to have a party for the 100th?
Yeah, it's going to be in person in San Diego in February.
Very cool. Very cool. How about you, Donovan?
Well, TC53 is meeting in Cupertino December 6th. It's kind of an open invitation to anyone who's interested in that standard, 419, who wants to come and comment on it. I don't know if there's anyone apart from Node-RED in our organization that would be interested, but certainly worth reaching out to them if the chair hasn't already.
Update, Dan, intro. I think we all know you. Sorry, I skipped that over, but you're an old friend.
I didn't want to interrupt anything. I just wanted
that's
to.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't have any
update on W3C. The program committee is still going strong on the Secure the Web Forward, although now it's 5
Francois
a.m.
has put together a draft report, and I'm going to work on that with him. And that draft looks pretty good. A very comprehensive workshop report for that. And also, I guess it's worth noting there's a tag election happening, I'll drop that URL into the chat as well.
We have an issue on that, an open issue on our standards that we're going to cover today. Call for nominations.
Well, I'd love to have.
You may put the link in the chat.
I'm not just here to campaign, by the way.
Yeah,
I do that too, Dan.
The issue, the nominations are closed, and now the election is on. So.
Oh, copy that. All right, cool. Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah, but yeah, Dan would be an obvious person for us to rank very highly.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other group, Toby? Things you're working on?
On the OSI Open Policy Alliance front, the focus is on open source AI, really, in these two spaces, and will be for the as I said last time, for like the remainder of the year. So, nothing specific that like ties directly into what we do here. And, that's keeping them busy on that too.
And we have one OSI issue that's pretty interesting.
Sorry, what?
We have one OSI issue that's in.
Oh, that is a fair point. Do you want to talk about this in this context? Does it make sense?
Sure, we can give everyone a quick update. You're our OSI rep.
Yeah, so one of the project that I think NPM depends on changed their license to the Blue Oak license, which is an open source like license, not yet certified by the Open Source Initiative as an open source license. And that process was kickstarted of getting that license approved not long ago. I saw it on the list a few weeks back, If I remember correctly, the process is like it gets done in two 30-day increment. There's first you ask for the license to be certified on the list. Then it takes 30 days to get like a first sort of pre-approval, and then you have another 30 days for the board to go forth and approve or disapprove. And then it makes it a certified open source license by the OSI, which would be fairly helpful to make sure that NPM doesn't have as a dependency a project with a non open source certified license.
So we had dependencies with Node.js, Appium, Electron, Angular project has gone public with their dependency. So
so there's more than just NPM.
Yeah, it's minor details, a lot of our impact projects. So it's in the glob, I think, library. So Louis Villa, I met with Louis and I met with the OSI Executive Director, LF Member Summit, and great collaboration between the two and the folks, the authors of the Blue Oak license. So they've submitted it. You can join the mailing list if you're curious on tracking it. But yeah, so we'll see. Hopefully that'll run smoothly, and our board is supportive if it's OSI to use it, you know, as an exception for our projects. Okay.
But just to be clear, once OSI approves it, the OpenJS board still would need to approve it? It's a separate process. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think initially we were going to submit it. Toby had some experience and we were going to submit it, but Louis did all the work, which is fantastic. Clarified some of the, you know, FAQs that they've been receiving as authors. So yeah.
Yeah, there was a little there's like a new process, and there's like the license when it's under 5 years is considered a new license. And Blue Oak was only turning 5 in March next year or April next year, and so you needed to be its author to be able to actually submit it before that, I think. And the process is also a little more heavyweight when it's in that configuration.
Ethan, how about you? Oh, go ahead, Toby.
No, I was wondering, like, you have shared a number of documents that you have written, and I don't know if you're able to talk about those yet or not. I think they're public, right?
They are.
Yeah. So I mean, this feels fitting to this conversation to some degree. If you wanted to share, I think it would be great.
Sure. The Office of the Cybersecurity Director at the U.S. government issued a request for information and offered up some key priority areas on security. So working with our security collab space and some of the work that we've done in the past on how we want to focus the direction of OpenJS and security. I submitted the response last week on the deadline, kind of initially on 2 areas. One is on providing funding, direct funding to projects to pay for the development, which is a little bit of divergence, I think, from a lot of other foundations. But I think we found with security in particular, you need to pay sometimes experts to do the work. It's hard to find. And we've seen the success of that with the project Alpha Omega through OpenSSF, how that's really accelerated a lot of the work happening in our projects. And then the other one is around international coordination, and we're urging the US government to create essentially its own sovereign tech fund to pay for infrastructure and security for projects, but to coordinate internationally. So those are the 2 areas that we picked. And so there is an issue in our security collab space that outlines it, as well as a link to the document. I can kind of cross-post it with this group as well. Should probably post a blog. I notice other folks who have submitted RFIs have done that as well. So definitely do that.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Let's see, Ethan, what's happening in Winter CG?
Winter CG, mainly the biggest thing is Node.js is starting to participate in some ways. There was a chat. I didn't get to make it to. I forget where it was organized. I think it might have been a Winter CG admin. Trying to pull it up. I didn't get to attend it, but basically there was a chat between Winter CG folks and they're talking about like Node.js logo actually showing up on Winter CG website. This is going to probably be routed here to the foundation in some way at some point if it hasn't been already to seek approval because that's like putting the logo and the name that's like the foundation's decision and then in addition to that Node.js sort of out of like necessity is looking into creating this standards positions repo team collab whatever it might be, and this is as James writes out is very similar to Mozilla's standards positions repo, and it's essentially to be a higher level than like the Winter CG side of just like when Node starts taking on certain standards, such as like all the web standards it's been adding over the past months, now years, I guess. What what are our positions on those standards? Are we like committed to implementing them 100%, or is there some modification to it? And like what are those modifications? And like when something new happens, how do we provide support for it? An ongoing discussion right now is like making fetch stable. And a lot of people are against making fetch stable because the fetch spec isn't stable. Like the fetch spec adds, like any WHATWG spec, adds breaking changes over time. They don't use Semver to denote it. And so it does not fit well into the Node.js pattern, release pattern, version pattern. So lots of open discussions there and whatnot. And that's kind of the summary from Winter CG all the way to Node.js.
Okay, just on the Winter CG and the Node.js logo, my understanding was that individuals from the Node project supported Winter CG, but the project TSC had not fully endorsed. And has that now happened through the TSC?
I don't know. I'm not on the TSC, so but that's I think exactly right. I think we're waiting on the powers that be to make final decisions.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so if there's an endorsement using the logo, that would be the TSC that I would coordinate with. So
I agree. There's not been any official TSC decision there. However, TSC members have blocked PRs on Winter CG approval for things, which sort of suggests like that is in fact the direction it's going.
Yeah, this was sparked by the Navigator object being added to Node.js, which was like the short history is Navigator is a browser thing. It was added to the minimum common API, or it's been in the minimum common API. Deno has it, Cloudflare has it. Someone in Node.js, a TSC member or whatnot, added that feature to Node. It was approved. It was shipped in Node 21. It broke things. People didn't expect it. There was fierce debate on if it should even be in Node, which led into a fierce debate on why is Node even doing minimum common API things from Winter CG if they're not present in the Winter CG. And then people were like, well, we kind of are, but not really. How can we make this more official? And then that's kind of where it leads to, TSC needs to make some decisions and lay some groundwork.
Okay. Well, thanks for the context, because I was tagged on the logo, so I needed more context. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Do you know why it broke things? Were people using it to detect whether they're in Node.js or a browser?
Yep, pretty much. Most notably Next.js. Latest Next.js crashed and burned because there was some code being used to check Navigator and things like that, and Node 21, which I don't think Next.js ever said it supported, but people started like trying it because new things, and then everything broke, and that's where a lot of people participated in a like why does this even exist? Why did you break my code? And it's like, well, honestly, Node.js 21, it's a breaking, it's a major version. Expect things to break. But in hindsight, we're adding PNPM and Next.js to the canary in the gold mine, so that future node version changes might not break those things anymore. And we'll know about things like if Navigator was to be added, what kind of impact would that really have?
And it's worth noting that Node can add all the functionality it wants from the web without breaking anyone. It's only when they add them as globals with the same name as browser globals that they're risking this kind of breakage. And Semver allows it, but does not require it. So is just whether the Node collaborator group decides that it's an okay idea to do that breakage or not and risk it.
Well, I assume the goal of adding all these objects for a browser working on Node.
Yeah, you just froze.
Oh, did I?
You're back.
Okay. I assume that the reason for adding all these objects to Node is to get code that is written for a browser originally working in Node. And I think if you have to import them, then that doesn't quite work for this purpose as well.
Maybe that was just me, but did I just freeze or did you just freeze for a bit?
I froze.
Zoom's having some issues. I think a lot of us are all over the place here. But
well, I think Leo, what you're saying is the goal is interoperability. The challenge, the conflict though, is that just because someone has written code that runs in one of those two environments doesn't mean it can work or should work in the other environments. And so there's sort of a conflict between maximal interoperability and wanting to have that interoperability without changing code. And there are different opinions as to whether interoperability should be a default, like should just things should just become interoperable versus whether an author should be needing to make things interoperable.
Well, usually if you need them to be a default to maximize interoperability.
True. But yeah, I guess there's fundamental environmental assumptions that people often make when writing code that like later making the things interoperable by default violates, and that's what causes all this breakage every time Node adds a browser global. So it's sort of an unavoidable conflict. And Node seems to currently be moving towards a world where they encourage that breakage to get to the point where you can run most code in both places. But
I think that's a very good goal, though. Like it maybe it does justify some temporary breakage.
Yeah, I think I'm in your camp. Yeah, it's a very big problem. It goes all the way back to fetch and whatnot. Interoperability has a huge desire in the growing ecosystem with the advent of like edge functions and such across all these different companies and runtimes. And the thing is that it's all JavaScript. So why not, like, why couldn't my general purpose thing run both in a browser and in some AWS Lambda or whatever, or Cloudflare workers? Yeah, Toby, it goes right.
Well,
It goes
but
back to promises.
My answer is that if it's dealing with Navigator, it's not general purpose because Node doesn't navigate.
Yes, but even code that was written for a browser and is intended to be run in a browser, sometimes it's useful to be able to run it in Node, for example, for testing. Most unit testing frameworks run in Node. And I've actually had this problem fairly recently where when we were trying to write tests and the code was written for a browser and therefore it wasn't working without a ton of mocking up of objects.
Yeah, and that's a major proponent for it. I think the thing that people are struggling with, which is just like fetch, is people are like, I want interoperability. I want fetch. I want it to work the same across everything. And then they get that. And then they're like, but wait, you broke my stuff. And it's
right.
Like,
it turns out it was an XY problem. They think they want fetch and navigator, but actually they want their code to work. And those things are in conflict.
A big push now is trying to just document and share a lot of that sentiment, especially around networking. I have to do this. I'm doing this in Vercel in particular. A lot of people just don't even know the difference between fetch and like a regular general purpose HTTP client. And they're like, why is this slow? And I'm like, well, because you're using fetch. Fetch is slow. Fetch does everything for you, and you don't even know what it's doing. Like, it does things you don't even know under the hood. When you don't get that, when you have to do it yourself, that's where the speed improvements come in, because you don't have to do all these unnecessary checks and figuring out what the user may or may not want. So that interoperability problem comes both ways. Toby has his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an ongoing problem for like over a decade at this point. I was wondering if, as a group, we wanted to dig more into this and have an opinion and publish this opinion, or not. And if not, I think we should move on to the next issue. And if we do, I think we should like take this seriously and actually like do something deeper than just having this conversation.
I think if we're going to have any position, we definitely need to be cognizant of what it could imply. I think that's where Leo was talking about the advocate as advocates for interoperability. It's tricky to not have, if we have the alternative opinion, what that would do to skew other projects. But I also don't know if this is necessarily the right venue to be having this in-depth discussion. So yeah, to Toby's point, we can make a more formal time to discuss this if necessary.
I didn't want to shut the conversation down. Sorry if it came across that way.
No.
Okay, good.
I actually agree. All this is off topic for this room, and I could rant on it for a long time, and I'd love to talk about it with all of you more. Just pick a time and I'll be there, but this meeting is not that venue.
I do like it when we do have sort of the cross standards orgs connecting dots and then following up. I don't know if this maybe is the case, right, with Winter CG and others, where the discussion should go deep.
Ethan, the stuff that you're documenting for Vercel, like, is this going to be public? Like, and how deep is that documentation?
No, it's nothing formalized right now. But it's also multifaceted. Mateo and folks have long advocated for the need for better documentation regarding Undici, or simply Undici's part in Node.js. I bet there might even be people on this call right now who don't know entirely what Undici is or where it's going and what the status is there. And so a part of that is people don't even today, people don't even know that the fetch inside of Node.js is Undici. They don't even know that's the same thing. They don't know it's vendored in. And like I was just saying, there's all these differences between fetch and like normal HTTP networking clients. There's no documentation currently that shares this on the Node.js site, on the Undici site, and like who is responsible for adding that? Probably myself and other contributors. We haven't gotten to it because there's other things we're doing. So I think a part of that is like, yeah, I don't have a great answer. I'm just trying to talk about it with people so people start learning and knowing better. And like when I do code reviews internally, I always mention this stuff. But in regards to like a formal post or updating docs upstream, just haven't gotten to that point yet because I don't necessarily know how or like what position to frame it all in.
Anything else on this topic? By the way, congrats, Ethan, you're a new rep for TC39.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I am going to be there for the 99th and 100th meetings, hopefully. And that came out of nowhere. The Vercel current TC39 rep, Justin Ridgewell, is leaving Vercel. And so to not give up his seat, I'm going to take that over and see how I can participate and learn a lot.
Awesome. Any other updates from our standards work, our different entities?
Sure.
Chris?
I will mention, though, there's no limit to the number of delegates that you can have, Ethan. So if you have colleagues that are interested in, committee activity,
You'd be more than welcome. Yeah. So yeah, I know Jordan already kind of touched on the upcoming meeting for TC39 and everything, but I did want to mention, because I don't think this has been come up here yet, and somebody can interrupt me if it has, but and I think in one of my first times that I've joined here, I asked if there was anyone from IETF that came here so that I could nag them about the status of the IESG review for timestamps with additional information, which is a draft that we've been waiting to be approved, or I guess blessed in some way. That's been blocking, or one of the blockers, I should say, for the temporal proposal. So that has finally made it through. I think it's still like awaiting publication, but that's basically removes one of the largest blockers for temporal landing. So that's really good news.
I want to add to that. Last meeting was the first one it's had in like 2 or 3 years where there wasn't any observable changes to temporal, which is an amazingly good sign. The changes there are some changes coming to the next meeting, but they're very small. And if, the likelihood is that there might be no more changes, and it might be like able to be shipped unflagged and polyfilled and all that stuff. So that's good.
Yeah. I try to attend the temporal biweeklies when I can, and there is a great the bar is set very high for making like anything substantive. We need like really compelling reasons to make any changes. So there's like a lot of scrutiny on that. But yeah, still plenty of open items on there, but yeah, it's in really good shape. The 100th meeting, obviously we're trying to make a little bit bigger deal of that than, because we all use base 10 math, and numbers with 0 at the end are special, and 2 zeros even better. So we're still hoping to work some things out. We're trying to get like some swag. One thing we were surprised about is that we deliberately, when I say we, I mean the chair group, deliberately wanted to host it on the West Coast in the US, because traditionally we get the most number of like in-person interest and people attending. And we're kind of surprised to find out that there are some folks that are in that area that are kind of like, oh, I don't really want to go because I'm not limited by the time zone, and I don't like exactly where the location is and stuff like that. So that was kind of surprising and at the same time disappointing, but maybe we weren't, it was the best option that we had. But yeah, we do still hope that we get as many people as possible. Another unfortunate thing that was pointed out was the US B1, B2 visa, that by far and large, most of the TC39 delegates are going to fall in the category of folks that don't need a visa. The waiver program for US visa applies to a lot of Europe, and other countries, Australia, Japan, South Korea. But notably, there are plenty that it doesn't cover, like India, China, and some of the wait times on that are like effectively a travel ban, because you've got to wait like 400 to 500 days just to get an interview for the visa. So, I mean, it's good for 10 years, but that's really not, compelling for somebody that is in one of those countries that's affected. China surprisingly has the lowest wait time, but it's still something like over 100 days before you can get an interview. So yeah, not ideal, but it is what it is, I suppose. It had been mentioned that therefore the U.S., because of this visa issue, that the U.S. meetings like go against our inclusion goals, which is not a totally unfair comment. But I mean, at the same time, like in-person meetings in general are inherently exclusionary. There's a broad number of people that will necessarily exclude. So I'm not sure how you're never going to totally get around. I don't care where you're hosting the meeting, right? If it's in person, you're never going to totally get around entry requirements and visa requirements. Of course, the Schengen visa, I think wait time is something like 15 days or something. It's like quite reasonable. So that's definitely a much better calculus than for the US visa. what else is going on? Oh, I think is Leah still here? Did we get dates for the CSS winter meeting? Because that was like, there was like a risk it was going to overlap with TC 3900 meeting, but now that looks okay. But I'm not sure if like the dates are totally nailed down, though. It looks like maybe mid-February for that is the last I saw on that thread.
Last I saw, you're talking about the winter meeting conflicts thread?
Yeah.
Well, if we're both looking at the same thread, then I guess I don't have more information. Last time I looked at it, I thought January was still on the table. Oh no, then February 12, but then it's terrible for Florian. I mean, it's pretty important if Florian can't make it.
Is this the TC39 event or is this something else?
No, the CSS
No,
event.
this is the CSS winter meeting.
Yeah, I thought that was the question about when the CSS winter meeting is.
Sorry, I might have confused someone because I did mention that there was some risk that it was going to overlap with the TC39 plenary in February, but that looks like.
When is the TC39 plenary in February? I mean, I could look at the calendar.
Like the 4th through the 7th or something along those lines.
Oh, it doesn't look like it's going to conflict then.
Yeah, no, I think that's
they're
fine.
discussing mid-February or later.
It's the 6th through the 8th.
Yeah, and I mean, we have enough people that are on both the CSS working group and TC39 that this would be a reason to move it.
Yeah, no, I think it was looking like there was going to be that issue, but it doesn't look to be the case anymore. But I think the dates are still not nailed down. But when we have that, we should just update the issue on the schedule for 2024.
Right. And by the way, we do have, it looks like we might have dates for the tag meeting in the winter. Looks like it's going to be in January, last week of January in London.
Jory keeps a standards calendar too, which is public, which he hopes helps with some air traffic control as well. So.
Oh, is there a way to like add things to it?
Yes, just ping Jory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting. That's what I was mentioning. When we have the date, we should update the issue. It's here. I'll post it in the chat.
Oh, hi, Daniel.
Just a guest.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of,
I'm not trying to hone in on your territory, Leah. Don't worry.
Let's see. First issue, W3C tag election. Let's give everyone an update. I think our issue is it's not as updated as it should be.
Well, there's one other W3C thing I'd point out, which is that the new CEO's first day was yesterday. So if you were planning to do some sort of reach out, Robin, which I vaguely recall, and I think it would be appropriate, especially considering he doesn't really know how the standard sausage is made. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but I think he's more of a help people get along type person than a definitely not an expert in the how the W3C or the open source and standard sausage is made. So helping him, with your perspective, since you've been, on both, you've been in industry, you've been in, nonprofits, I think you could be a valuable resource for him if you reached out to him and he was sensible about it. So that's one thing. He has a blog. I don't have the link handy, but the W3C blog today is his hello, I'm Seth message, which was quite appropriate.
Okay.
And then on the tag election, so as Dan mentioned at the beginning of the call, the nominations are closed. The election is open. It's open till December 12th, as I recall. And we, the OpenJS Foundation, have a vote. Is Jory on the call yet? Or anyway, since it's, it's a sort of, it talks about, actual people, it's probably, private conversations with Jory on how you suggest we vote. I don't know. She's got a process, and obviously candidates that, are in our community kind of recuse themselves from, but certainly a conversation we could have of how to cast the foundation's vote in that. Personally, and I'll say this with Dan on the call, I think since all the candidates who have any chance of not being elected are quite qualified, maybe we should focus on making sure that the chairs get reelected or are elected since they can't be reappointed anymore. So
just to clarify,
maybe Dan disagrees. I don't know. Pardon?
No, just to clarify that point, and I was going to kind of say for the past 10 years, basically, yeah, which I can't believe, the tag chairs, Peter and myself, have been reappointed by the team. So we were appointed in actually 2013 by Tim, and we've been subsequently reappointed every 2 years. With this new process, 2024, we've introduced term limits on appointed seats, which is something that both Peter and I supported. However, that doesn't actually kick in with this election cycle. So, according to the AB people that we've talked to, including Florian,
but the team makes the election, and apparently they interpret the wording anyway. Whatever.
It doesn't matter because
it doesn't
Peter
matter.
and I
Obviously,
are
if you
standing
both
anyway.
get reelected, if you both get elected, then it's moot. If you don't get elected and somebody says, "Hey, wait a minute, we need people who know how the tag actually works to chair it," that's going to be a challenge. So, yeah.
The other thing to point out is that we weren't comfortable running this. This came down to kind of the wire because we were not comfortable running for election until the issue with the additional seats was resolved, because we didn't feel comfortable running against incumbents.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so it was resolved, and as it turned out, two of the incumbents chose not to run anyway. And so I think we're in a fairly good position. There's nobody on that list that I would say would not be a good member of the tag. And we have a couple of new people. Also Martin Thompson, who's it looks likely will become part of the tag. I don't know. I mean, Martin Thompson is one of the candidates. So yeah, so that's good to see, because I think Martin has that IETF background.
It would be great to have Martin there. I agree.
Yeah. When we had Mark Nottingham on the tag, we had this direct line into IETF, and we've been missing that. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts. I see Leah on the queue though, and I'll step back.
Leah?
So two things. First, I want to echo what Michael said. I think having been in the tag for the last 3 years, I think it would be catastrophic to not have chairs that are experienced at being chairs. And I think the process is severely flawed around this. It should not be possible to be in that situation. It should not be necessary for both chairs to be running at once. And the fact that both chairs ended up having to run, it's basically a workaround. It's a hack to fix a deeper problem, because the problem with the process remains after this. And also, it is a very deeply flawed and problematic process. And separately from the tag election, we should pursue some way of fixing it. people were encouraged to run, the chairs were encouraged to run so that they would be more likely to be appointed. But if they run and they don't win, and they don't get elected, that is, and then W3C appoints them after, that is like W3C basically telling the membership, we don't care about your votes. Like, but also, like, you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. The whole WC election system is horribly flawed, but it is what it is. I've spent years trying to fix it, and nobody wants to. People would rather have elected candidates who don't do anything than than even talk about elections anymore, because it's such a toxic subject.
I'm not talking about fixing W3C elections in general, but here we're talking, this is a much more specific issue. Like, there needs to be continuity, and for continuity, you need to have at least one person in the tag that has been a chair before. Sorry, Dan.
I was just going to say, I think some of these issues were discussed at the session that we had in the face-to-face meeting in April in Japan, where we actually got to sit down with Florian from the AB and focus on that, focus on some of these issues with the process. And we need basically a part 2 of that. We need to do a part 2 of that in 2024 so that we can fix those issues, or try and fix some of those issues specifically around the tag election. But I don't think there's any crisis right now, because I think like I said, I think the candidates that we have are good. We don't have any problematic candidates. And I think so. I think we're good for now. That's my kind of view.
And it seems highly unlikely to me that there will be 2 losers, and it just seems incomprehensible to me that both Dan and Peter would be in that list. But I think for the short term, what we can do is vote wisely and rank people with this problem in mind. And I guess we could have it all over in 2 years. We might have it all over again, but then again, new people may have stepped up, or people may have found other things to do. So anyway, but yeah, I'd urge us to not worry about the deeper problem, but just try to make it as good as possible in this election, which I think means ranking both Peter and Dan quite highly. I'm sure you disagree.
Was the you me or Dan?
Oh.
I definitely agree.
He was joking with Dan. That's my interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would 100% agree with what Michael just said. Yeah.
Likewise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm anyway, that's all I have on W3C.
I'm just trying to track some of the chats a little bit. I will send you all a link in the standards channel for that air traffic control calendar. And before we hit on the next issue, is there anything else in the chat with Jordan and Leah that we need to bring back? No? Yes.
Oh, we're just going back and forth on the node and browser stuff.
Okay.
You can talk about it if we're dying to not get time back, but otherwise.
No. Let's see what else we
take
have.
It offline.
We talked about the meeting and schedule conflicts, so I will, and maybe even we'll drop a calendar link into that issue 259. The next issue may be a chicken and egg thing, issue 256, on documenting requests for travel funds. There is a lot of work happening in the Cross Project Council on the same issue and policy, but I know with you all, they would take sort of direction. I think the question is how or if the CPC will allocate buckets of money for certain things. We're doing the same thing with our event budget. For example, our program committee is saying maybe we use half for event participation and the other half to fund a speakers bureau. So these have been, great 30, 60-minute discussions on these things. So I still believe this group needs to allocate and determine how you all will decide how your funds are spent, not knowing exactly what those funds are right now. But it might be a topic of a longer discussion than we have in the next 11 minutes, unless you all want to hit some high level points.
Jory has a doc that she shared. I don't know if it's shared in the issue on the topic. I think we made some reasonable progress.
Oh, good.
Last time on this, I think there were action items on moving
Oh,
forward.
look at that. There's some
Jory...
budget set aside for that. Yeah. There is a document. Thank you, Toby.
And I think there were some good takeaways to bring back to the CPC and the discussion on that. Notably, sort of allocating 2K in general for local travel and 4K for international travel. That was based on some data from somewhere that seemed to get approval and from folks. I mean, folks seem to agree that this kind of made sense in general, and so that was just like a useful data point. Anyway, I think we should just continue that conversation when Jory is there to lead it, and maybe spend a little bit more time on it at that point.
Good. Oh, great. Thank you. Let's see what else is on the issue. Let's see. On SME participation, defining essentially
Same thing. These are like long ongoing threads. Like I don't think we're gonna make any progress right now on those because we don't when we have more time and the right people are there. So yeah.
Makes sense to me. Well, I think we got a lot of we made a lot of progress and shared a lot of information. Is there anything else that you all want to share, advocate for, give a heads up?
Just super quickly on the W3C voting timeline, make sure that we actually don't miss the time by which we have to vote. Jory's supposed to be voting for us, but I think that both Micah and I, or alternate, or maybe Brian and I, can also vote if she's not there. So
I'm an alternate.
Oh, so good. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we don't have this nice conversation, all agree that about what we should do and then forget.
Yeah. Right? And I think I may have I said, oh, we all know Dan, old friend, but for folks who are watching on YouTube, do you want to, Dan, just give a little background on who you are? Since you're sort of, this meeting was sort of family, but for our external friends, yeah.
So my name's Dan Applequist. I co-chair the W3C Technical Architecture Group currently. I am also, for the last year and a half, I've been involved in the OpenSSF, where I sit on the TAC, the Technical Advisory Council, and also, which is also coming up for election. And let's see, what else? I was a board member for the JS Foundation back before it merged with the Node.js Foundation. So I was Samsung's board member when I was working for Samsung. Yes, and I think that about sums it up. I'm also interested in becoming more involved in this community, basically, as long as it doesn't displace Leah.
Yeah. And I think when we did that joint Secure the Web Forward with OpenJS, W3C, I mean, you ran point, OpenSSF and OWASP. I think I know what the big takeaway was, we do need more of those connections for all of those.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of connecting things. And so like the whole thing about the Secure the Web Forward workshop was really about getting people talking to each other. So I dropped the link. I can drop it on the YouTube thing as well. But all the all of the presentations, including videos of all the presentations that were given at that workshop, which was a virtual workshop, are up on the website on W3C, and we are working on the conference, on the workshop report as well, which will have more detail. And part of that workshop report will be calling for greater communication, greater ties between different groups. So that's something that I hope to continue to be doing.
Okay. Make sure you flag it for me when that's live, and then we can tweet it from OpenJS. The links to the sessions, and the report.
Will do.
Right.
By the way, in case that wasn't like 100% a joke, you should not be worried about displacing Leah at all. Like, the more the merrier. Like, it would be great to have your expertise here.
I'm glad.
Absolutely.
I keep seeing the same faces and the different places all the time. Or with Dan sometimes in the OpenSSF best practices working group as well.
Can I ask Dan if do you have funding issues for your standards and open source participation, or is your affiliation
Well,
been
since
sorted
you
out?
ask, I mean, I wasn't going to bring it up.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I
to
am
be
recently
transparent, we do
X'd
help
of my
with Leah.
previous employer, and in fact, yes, I do have funding issues with regards to my standards participation. I also, have lack of a job as well. So, but that's maybe a more profound thing. But
It's a fun club.
Yes. So I'm open
Funding
to
food and rent
ideas.
is, a higher
If
priority.
anybody knows any open roles that are going in the open source and open standard space, then please sling them my way. Absolutely. At this point, I'm out there. I'm looking. But yeah, I do have funding.
Yeah, I was trying to prompt you to make that pitch. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
My endorsement as well. So I've sent your CV around. Awesome. All right, everyone. Thanks all. If there's no other business, any other business? Awesome. Good discussion today. Thanks, everyone.